my name is Simon Catto. I'm a partner at Addleshaw Goddard, based in Edinburgh, and I mostly undertake commercial litigation.
Perfect. And why did you decide to study at the University of Edinburgh and why particular law?
Well, a few reasons really. I had already begun to do student placements at a firm of solicitors in Aberdeen called Burnett and Reed, which still exists, but I'd been going in there as a school student and had been taken down to court, and that was with an eye on doing a law degree. And so I knew then that I wanted to become a solicitor, and I wanted to go to Edinburgh because. Like Cairn, I had grown up in Aberdeen. I'd lived there, other than a brief period in the States before I started school. I'd been there my whole life, and I wanted to move away from home. And Edinburgh felt far away but close to home at the same time, if you know what I mean. So I was away but not totally away. So it felt like a good compromise.
Interesting, very interesting. And what are some of your favorite memories from Edinburgh, being a student, maybe from social life? Wait.
Oh, well, I went into halls of residence in Pollock Halls. So I was in Turner House in Pollock, and I know that student halls of residence that you all stay in now are really smart, but it wasn't really smart then. It was shared showers and toilets at the end of the corridors, and a room that had a sort of bar fire in it. Pollock Halls was great fun. Also, I began to play intramural football with a group of guys that were in the same halls as me, and I became close friends with them, stayed friends ever since. But my closest friendships were with people in the law faculty. So the law faculty in Edinburgh, I'm sure it's the same now. We had a week of freshers event, and then we had what was called a library exercise, and library's a bit different now because you've obviously got online resources, but this was before the internet was invented, so it was actual book citations and physical books all the time. And that helped us all bond with each other. So we were scurrying around the library for a whole week. It was quite a lot we had to do. And that helped us really get to know everyone. And from then on, you're in classes with everyone all the time. And I think law students do form a particular bond with each other when you're in the same class for years. So I have very happy memories. I did my an honours degree and then my diploma all at Edinburgh University, and that's going back. I mean, I left in the summer of 1995, so it's literally 30 years ago since I've been there. But it was great, really good.
That's very interesting. Thank you.
And could you tell us a bit about your current role at Addleshaw Goddard and how your career trajectory found you to have this role now today?
Of course, so I am head of disputes in Scotland for Addleshaw Goddard, and that means I have general responsibility for the whole of the disputes team, which encompasses commercial litigation, finance litigation, and what we call global investigation. But global investigation covers not only investigations, but also white collar crime, environmental crime, public inquiries, that kind of work. So I'm overall responsibility for that. The actual work, the legal work I do myself and the kind of cases I manage are almost all either commercial litigation, so usually businesses falling out with each other over trading relationships, or shareholders or partners falling out over the direction that a business is going in. I also have a specialism in sports litigation as well, so mostly football, but some other sports as well. That is quite a small part of my practice in the grand scheme of things, but it attracts quite a lot of attention, and everyone always wants to ask me about it. So I've done quite a lot of football work over the years. The first part of your question, or the second part of your question, was how I got here. Um, so after I graduated and did my diploma at Edinburgh University, I went back to Aberdeen and trained at a firm called Leadingham Chalmers. So Leadingham Chalmers in those days was a big firm. It's still a big firm, but it was a properly big firm then. It had um, been formed out of the merger of two big Aberdeen firms a few years earlier. So Edmonds and Leadingham and C&P Chalmers had merged to form Leadingham Chalmers. And in those days, the early 90s, traineeships were quite difficult to come by. There had been a recession, and there were a lot of people who didn't have traineeships, and I agonized about whether I wanted to return to Aberdeen or not. But the opportunity at Leadingham Chalmers was really good, and it was a really good firm. Um, Got to say, I absolutely loved it there. It had a really good atmosphere. Aberdeen in the mid 90s was a really good place to live and work. The oil industry was booming. The work that we were doing was really high quality. And I got on really well with the people that I worked with. The partners were great, really supportive. And the firm was big, but the individual teams were quite small. So the sort of responsibility I was given quite early on in my first seat was in commercial and corporate, and the responsibility I was given then quite an early stage was quite high, which was great. So but I knew I wanted to do litigation, and in those days, you did the seat that you wanted to qualify into. You would try and get that last. Nowadays, I know a lot of trainees try to get it as their third seat because the jobs are handed out earlier. But in those days, you would not get a job until maybe 3 months before the end of your traineeship. They would be allocated then. So I wanted to do litigation last, and that's what happened. So I stayed on with Liddy and Chalmers as a newly qualified solicitor in 1997, worked in the Aberdeen office until, well, I became a partner, eventually became a partner in the firm there in 2002, and then relocated to Edinburgh that year. And I was with Leeds until 2006. And at that point, a firm called McGregor's uh, came into the Aberdeen market, and Lydium Chalmers sort of split into two parts. So part of it went with McGregor's and merged with it, and part of it stayed and became more like what the Lydium Chalmers now is. And for those of us who worked in the Edinburgh office, that was an opportunity for me to consider a move then, because the work that I had been doing for the bigger firm, some of it was staying, some of it was going to McGregor's. It wasn't clear what that role was going to be. So I was very close to joining another firm, and then at the last minute, I got an approach from a man called Malcolm McPherson, who you may have come across because he's until very recently been the chairman of Hibernian Football Club. And Malcolm said, "Why don't you come and have a chat to us?" He was the senior partner of a firm called what it was called Henderson Boyd Jackson, but had just merged with a firm in England and was now called HBJ Gately Waring at the time. And I went and spoke to him, and he probably the best decision I've ever made. He said, "Come and join us. You'll really like it," and sold it to me as a firm that was going places, and he was right. So I joined that firm as a partner, and took with me two associates who worked with me, brought them to HBJ. One is now a KC, and the other is now head of litigation at Shoesmiths in Edinburgh. So they've both done well in the whatever it is, 18, 19 years since we made that move. So yeah, that was HBJ, and then in 2017, HBJ merged with Addleshaw Goddard. Addleshaw Goddard was already a very successful firm, primarily in Leeds, Manchester, and in London. It had no Scottish offering at all, and was looking for a merger partner to build up on a UK level. And we spoke to them, and over quite a long period of time, and we felt it was the right thing to do to merge and be the Scottish offices of AG. And that's what happened, and it's been great. Really worked well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's quite a long-winded answer, so apologies for
That's all,
that.
that's all right. But from what you described, it seems like your role covers quite like a wide range of legal practices, like finance, commercial. Do you think that's something that you recommend? Like, is it rewarding? And would you say that other students should look for something more broad?
So, well, yes, it is. First of all, yes, it is really rewarding, and I'm very fortunate. I've had and still have a brilliant career, and I really enjoy it, and I'm happy with I don't think anyone gets up every morning singing "Oh, what a beautiful morning," but generally I'm energized, enthusiastic. I look forward to coming into work. I like the people I work with, and you're right. I have been fortunate that I've been able to do a wide range of types of case. I think as time is passing, and as I see the younger people coming through the firm, there is an increasing specialism, and there's an expectation that you will have a deeper but particular cases. So, for example, the guys that we have in our team who are doing the global investigations work, they're not doing the commercial work that I do. And similarly, the guys doing the banking litigation aren't doing the sports work that I do, and so on. So we're seeing people with increasing levels of specialism, and part of that is driven by client demand. In the old days, we were a busy court department where we would do matrimonial work, construction work, employment work, anything dispute, private client disputes, anything that sort of the client base that we had demanded, we would do. Whereas now firms are a lot more targeted in the types of work that they do and the specialisms that they offer, and that's, I think, the way that the profession is going.
Thank you. Could you explain for us a little bit about what your role serving on the Scottish Courts and Tribunal Service involves?
So I no longer do that. I was a board member for 8 years between 2014 and 2021, and that is a statutory position. So the Scottish Courts and Tribunal Service was established by statute, I think, about 2007, and there is a solicitor member. At all times on the board. It's currently Lindsay Walker, who's one of my partners here. She's now taking on that role. Um, I wanted to do it because I had been, as a firm, we are obviously significant consumers of the Scottish Court service, and I wanted to get an understanding of how it worked and see if I could influence it in even in a small way. It was also it's a huge organization. It has an enormous number of employees. It has a huge real estate portfolio across the whole of the country. All of that needs managed. So there are people issues, there are real estate issues or state issues. And then there are also the thing that I did was I was the vice chair of the Audit and Risk Committee as well. And that was really interesting for me because I had been a board member at both in the Scottish firm but also the UK board of Gately. But then joining the board of a public organisation was a completely different thing altogether. And the way that they were managed and operated and the scale of it was really eye-opening from my point of view. And it's also, from a sort of slightly, I suppose, exciting point of view, it got me into the inner bowels of the Court of Session. I was going into doing meeting with judges and hearing their views on it, and senior sheriffs and the like, and people who had been very experienced in industry and in finance. And yeah, it brought me into contact with really interesting and capable people, and it was fascinating. So yeah, I'm delighted I did it. Uh, yeah, and I think there are issues facing the courts in the sense of things like access to justice. When I was on the board, we had COVID, which meant that we had to, at one point, we were having to rent cinemas to enable the trials to proceed while observing the distancing, etc. So there's been a lot of challenges around in terms of the delivery of services by the courts, and it was fascinating being part of that.
Interesting, very interesting. And the next question is, what would you say was the proudest moment in your career? Maybe some complex case you worked on or anything like that.
Um, I I won. I've had a few really good wins, but one that nowadays when I'm involved in big ticket litigation, we will usually have a very big team. So we will have often senior and junior counsel, and then we will have a team of solicitors that I'm working with as well. And therefore, any wins that we have are a sort of shared glory. But on a sort of smaller but bigger scale, I am I did a case in the Court of Arbitration for Sport, and I was acting for it's a reported decision, so I can talk about it. I was acting for Falkirk Football Club, and they had a claim in relation to training and development compensation for a player who had signed for Bradford City. And they had got quite far with it without instructing solicitors. And Bradford had appealed it to the Court of Arbitration for Sport, which is, as you probably know, an international tribunal which sits in Lausanne in Switzerland. And so I went with Falkirk to Lausanne in Switzerland, and quite coincidentally, the people from Bradford and their legal team were all staying in the same hotel as us, so we saw them over breakfast on the morning of the hearing as well. But we went to the Court of Arbitration for Sport and won. And you don't get the decision there then. You have to wait sort of 10 to 12 weeks before it comes out. So, but you get a notification the day before saying you're going to get your decision and I think it was 4 p.m. on a Friday afternoon I got it. And winning that was a really big thing for me. I knew I was in the right, or like I felt like I was in the right. But then, there are arguments that have credibility being taken by a what was then a QC on the other side, and yeah, winning that was a massive thrill. Even though the amount of money was quite small compared to some of the really big cases we deal with, but the buzz of going and winning a case like that was tremendous.
That's very impressive. That's very impressive.
Thank you. And for current Edinburgh law students aspiring to have careers in the legal practice, what would your main piece of advice for them to be? Maybe it could be something like how they can get their first vacation scheme or trading contract, or just something in general in practice.
So, I, always enthuse and say yes as much as possible. So, I think that I do get involved in graduate recruitment within the firm. We have quite a complicated process now where people come in and do, students will spend a day with us and they do various assessments, including uh, an exercise that I would have found impossibly difficult when I was at that stage, which is they get a problem which is a kind of mix of legal and commercial issues, and they have to make sense of it and then do what's called a partner briefing. So we come in acting as the partners in the firm, and you're the trainee, and you have to tell us all about it. And it's hard. And I would encourage you all to if you get opportunities like that, take them. Also, firms are looking for people who have done more than just the degree. So it's helpful if you've got um, both extracurricular, and I now hear this phrase supercurricular as well, which is, you have your extracurricular stuff like if you play football or something like that, and we do look for people who have done things in their spare time, but also people who have, if you are interested in a career in the law, do something that shows that. They always say, show don't tell. Go and show us what you've done that tells us that you really have an enthusiasm and a desire to do it. And then when you get the opportunity to go into a firm, and I hope all the firms like ours have summer placements, and I hope that you will all be able to find somewhere that that suits you and fits in with you. But when you go there, make the most of it. You know, don't ask intelligent questions, but don't ask endless questions. And try to do if you're given a task, it will be because the person giving you it thinks that someone at your stage of your career will be capable of doing it. So try to find out the answer yourself. Try and work it out yourself and do it. And also try to find your own voice. I know that there is a tendency among your generation to look to AI a lot, and it definitely has an important place, and we use that in our in our daily work, and it is important. It's going to become increasingly important, but it sometimes occasionally can result in students and younger solicitors producing internal emails that sound like they've been drafted by a robot, and because they have been. And so you'll find an authentic voice of your own to communicate in, and try to write your own work and write your own emails. You can get AI to do a lot of nowadays you can get instant answers to things that previously would have taken hours and hours and hours to research. So you will be able to buy yourself time to think through the answer and make sure that if you're then asked follow-up questions about it, you actually know the thing that you're talking about. Because that's another thing I sometimes find is that people produce work that's substantially AI generated. They actually don't really know what they're talking about. They've just sort of produced a thing that you get and they can't talk about it. So those are probably some of the tips, but mostly when young people come through the firm, I'm looking for enthusiasm and energy. Look alive. I attend. Always come to the office. If you get an opportunity for hybrid working, come to the office because you will learn much more, and you will also develop personal relationships that you can't achieve by doing things online. So, attend and enthuse.
Thank you. It's a great advice. Thank you. And are there any books or podcasts you would recommend for the students? It might be something career or non-career related. Maybe some books inspiring you or motivate you.
Oh, well, I don't know about books that I mean, I would when I was at student level, the and coming into uh into my first job, I my mum bought me a copy of Globe and Henderson, and it's not the kind of book that you sit and read, but it was always my first port of call for almost anything. It will give you the sort of easy or surface answer, and then you can find other texts or resources that will allow you to go in more deeply. So that maybe make me seem terribly old-fashioned, but I would still regard Logan Henderson as a really, really useful resource. Similarly, if you're interested in doing litigation work, then and I encourage all the guys to do this. Don't come and ask. We have a court clerk who will is a encyclopedic knowledge of the rules of court, but don't go and ask him. Read either the annotated rules of the court session or McPhail and Sheriff Court Practice. The answer to almost anything you need to know will be in there. You can check it with him afterwards, but find out the answer. Find out the answer yourself.
Thank you.
Um, so yeah, I mean that's probably what I mean. The kind of books and podcasts that I listen to podcasts on the way into work almost every day, but they're mostly about Aberdeen Football Club or the Boston Red Sox. So probably not terribly useful for for your colleagues' purposes.
Yeah, thank you so much. And the last question is, what advice would you give to your younger self?
Oh, that's a really uh, that's a really difficult question. I don't. I don't think I missed out on anything. There are two things that I didn't do that I know that I would have enjoyed as well as the things I did do, but I don't feel bad about it. One is that I think when you're young, uh, working in London or another big city, New York or Hong Kong or whatever, is a really good experience, and it gets you access to big work, whether it's commercial work you want to do or litigation or whatever. And I think that is, when I was that age, I was working in Aberdeen. Now, I benefited enormously because I moved up the ladder very quickly to partnership by doing that. But equally, I probably missed out on opportunities to do really, really big ticket work. And that's something that I think back and think, oh, once you get into your 30s and you're maybe thinking about having family, places like London become a lot less attractive because the cost of living is enormous and it's maybe not as attractive as the like of Edinburgh to bring up a family. But I think when you're if you're young and you don't have family, and that's probably, if I was advising my younger self, would I go to London in my 20s? I would probably maybe think about it more seriously, and I that's something that I've maybe thought about as I've got older and thought I didn't do that. And then the other thing which a lot of litigation lawyers obviously think about is whether or not you want to go to the bar, becoming an advocate
Mhm.
or a barrister. And I don't regret, I've definitely done the right thing for my skill set. When I was young, I hummed and hawed with that a lot and not, etc. And I didn't go. And I think in hindsight, I made the right decision on that. I definitely think I did. But I also sometimes look at advocates and the people that we instruct at the bar are really, really good. They're really clever, really sharp, really capable. They have the ear of the court. They are fantastic. And you have to be on your game at all times. And you're also not relying on the reputation of a firm like we are. We have the brand Addleshaw Goddard, which is across, whatever we are in 19 offices across many different countries, and that is a big support. Whereas if you're at the bar, you're literally just with your own, under your own flag, and it's your own name and your own reputation, and you have to be on your game every single day. So I guess if your question was, would I advise my younger self to go to the bar? No, but I think that it's a career that if you are really smart and you want to do litigation and you back yourself, then that's a very, very rewarding career and something that I would, recommend but I look at other people who have done that and think, wow, that's a good career and they must really enjoy it. And you also get that, like I was saying about my Kaz case, you get that winning feeling. Obviously, it means you get the losing feeling as well sometimes too, obviously. So, but yeah, so I would definitely advise my younger self to think really carefully about a career at the bar. Albeit I'm not sorry that I didn't do that,
Thank you.
if that makes sense.
Yeah.